How to learn any skill faster than you thought possible. Hello and welcome. Have you ever looked at someone who is incredibly good at something, whether it's playing a beautiful melody on the piano, speaking a foreign language fluently, or building a successful business from scratch, and thought to yourself, I wish I could do that? You are not alone. We often look at skilled people and see them as having some kind of special gift, some innate talent that we simply do not possess. But what if I told you that the gap between you and the person you admire is not as wide as you think? What if the secret to learning new things quickly and effectively is not about having a special brain, but about having a special method? This book is your method. It is your guide to unlocking the incredible learning potential that already exists inside of you. We are going to throw away the old, slow, and frustrating ways of learning and replace them with a powerful, science-backed framework that will allow you to master any skill you desire faster than you ever imagined possible. This is not about magic. It is about a smarter way to work. Before we begin our journey, I have a simple question for you. Think about one skill, just one, that you have always wanted to learn but felt was out of your reach. What is it? Maybe it is learning to paint, starting a YouTube channel, or finally understanding how the stock market works. Take a moment to think about it, and when you have it, please share it in the comments below. There is power in declaring your goals, and I would love to see what you aspire to learn. Chapter 1. The Art of Deconstruction, Breaking It Down to Speed It Up. Imagine you are standing at the base of a colossal mountain. Your goal is to reach the summit. You look up, and the peak seems impossibly high, lost in the clouds. The sheer size of it is overwhelming, intimidating, and paralyzing. You might think to yourself, I can't climb that, it's just too big. This is exactly how most of us feel when we decide to learn a new, complex skill. Learning to code, becoming a great public speaker, or mastering a martial art can feel like trying to conquer Mount Everest in a single leap. It is a natural reaction to feel discouraged before you even begin. The task seems so monumental that our brains shut down in the face of such a challenge. But what if you were not looking at the entire mountain? What if, instead, a seasoned guide came to you and said, forget the summit for now. Just focus on walking to that large tree over there. It is only a few hundred feet away. Suddenly the task seems manageable. It is not scary anymore. It is just a short walk. Once you reach the tree, the guide points to a small stream a little further up. Now let's get to that stream. You do that, and then you walk to a distinct rock formation, and then to a small clearing. Step by step, you are moving forward. You are not thinking about the gigantic, intimidating mountain anymore. You are only thinking about the next small, achievable step. Before you know it, you have climbed higher than you ever thought possible, not by tackling the entire mountain at once, but by breaking it down into a series of simple, easy-to-manage walks. This, in its essence, is the powerful art of deconstruction. Deconstruction is the foundational principle of rapid skill acquisition. It is the process of taking that big, scary skill, that mountain, and breaking it down into its smallest fundamental components, its building blocks. We transform a single, overwhelming challenge into a series of small, manageable mini-skills. Why is this so incredibly effective? It is because our brains are not designed to handle massive amounts of new, complex information all at once. When we try to learn everything at the same time, we suffer from something called cognitive overload. Think of your brain's working memory like the RAM on a computer. If you try to open 100 heavy programs at the same time, your computer will slow down, freeze, and eventually crash. Your brain works in a similar way. Trying to learn Spanish by memorizing the entire grammar book on day one is like trying to open all those programs. Your brain will crash. You will become frustrated, confused, and you will likely conclude that learning Spanish is too hard for me. But the problem was not you. The problem was the method. Deconstruction works by respecting the limits of our brains. By focusing on one small piece of the puzzle at a time, you are giving your brain exactly what it needs: a clear, concise, and manageable task. This has a profound psychological effect. Each time you master one of these small components, you get a rush of success. You feel a sense of accomplishment. This feeling releases dopamine, a chemical in your brain associated with motivation and reward. You successfully walked to the tree, that feels good. Now you have the motivation to walk to the stream. This creates a powerful, positive feedback loop. Success breeds more success. Instead of feeling overwhelmed and quitting, you feel empowered and motivated to continue. You are building momentum, one small victory at a time. The fear of the mountain disappears, replaced by the quiet confidence that you can, in fact, take the next step. Remember this: every master was once a disaster. Every expert was once a beginner. The only thing that separates them from everyone else is that they, consciously or unconsciously, understood that you do not climb the mountain in one leap. You climb it one step at a time. Now, this all sounds good in theory, but how do we actually do it? How do you take a skill you know nothing about and break it down into its core components? This is where we get practical. This is the how-to part of our journey. The process of deconstruction is itself a skill, but it is one that is simple to learn. I'm going to give you a 4-step framework that you can apply to absolutely anything you want to learn, from baking bread to building a website. The first step, and arguably the most important, is to define your goal with absolute, razor-sharp clarity. You cannot deconstruct a vague desire. A goal like, "I want to learn to draw," is a terrible goal. It is a mountain with no clear peak. What does learn to draw even mean? Does it mean drawing cartoons? Does it mean creating photorealistic portraits? Does it mean designing architectural blueprints? The possibilities are endless, and because the goal is so fuzzy, it is impossible to break down. It is like telling a GPS, "I want to go somewhere nice." It cannot give you directions. You need to give it a specific address. Your learning goal needs an address. A much better goal would be, "I want to be able to draw a realistic portrait of a human face using a graphite pencil." Now we have something to work with, but we can make it even better by adding a time frame and a performance level. For example, in the next 90 days, I want to be able to draw a realistic portrait of a human face from a photograph using graphite pencils that is clearly recognizable as the person in the photo. This is a perfect goal. It is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It is our destination address. We know exactly what success looks like and when we want to achieve it. Before you can deconstruct any skill, you must first spend time constructing a crystal-clear vision of what you want to accomplish. This clarity will be your compass. It will guide every decision you make during the deconstruction process. Do not skip this step. A little bit of thinking up front will save you hundreds of hours of wasted effort down the road. You must know what you are aiming for before you can figure out how to get there. The second step is to research and identify the core components of the skill. This is the heart of deconstruction. Once you have your clear goal, you need to break it down into the smaller Lego bricks that make up the whole. But if you are a complete beginner, how are you supposed to know what those bricks are? You do this by leveraging the experience of people who have already reached the destination you are aiming for. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. The path to the summit has been walked by many others before you. Your job is to find their map. There are several ways to do this. The most obvious is to search online. If your goal is to learn that realistic portrait drawing, you could search for things like how to learn portrait drawing for beginners. You start your research. You look up books on public speaking, watch famous TED Talks, and maybe even find a local Toastmasters club. You would quickly discover the core components. 1. Structuring your content. Having a clear opening, body, and conclusion. 2. Creating simple, effective slides, if applicable. 3. Managing body language, posture, gestures, eye contact. 4. Controlling your voice, pace, volume, tone. 5. Practicing and rehearsing effectively. 6. Handling anxiety and stage fright. Suddenly, the vague, terrifying idea of public speaking has become a checklist of 6 concrete, learnable skills. This is the magic of deconstruction. It turns chaos into order. The third step in our framework is to sequence these components in a logical order. Once you have your list of building blocks, you need to decide which ones to learn first. Often, the correct order will be obvious from your research. You cannot learn to shade a portrait, a more advanced skill, before you have learned how to hold the pencil and make basic marks, a fundamental skill. You cannot learn to run before you can walk. Your goal here is to create a learning path, a curriculum for yourself. Lay out the skills in an order that makes sense, where each skill builds upon the previous one. For our portrait drawing example, a logical sequence would be 1. Learn about the required materials: pencils, paper, erasers. 2. Practice basic pencil control and strokes. 3. Understand the fundamental proportions of the human head. The Loomis method is a famous example. 4. Learn about value, light, and shadow to create the illusion of three-dimensional form. 5. Practice drawing each individual feature in isolation: eyes, nose, mouth, ears. 6. Finally, begin to combine all these skills to draw a complete head. This ordered list is your roadmap. It tells you exactly what to work on today, tomorrow, and next week. It eliminates the confusion and indecision of, what should I practice now? You just look at your list and focus on the very next item. This sequencing is crucial because it prevents you from trying to do too much too soon, which is a classic recipe for frustration and failure. Imagine trying to play a complex guitar solo on your first day of learning the instrument. You would fail miserably, not because you lack talent, but because you skipped all the necessary prerequisite steps: learning how to hold the guitar, how to press a string, how to play a single note clearly, how to play a basic chord, and how to switch between chords. Progress is built on a foundation. Sequencing ensures you build that foundation brick by brick, in the right order, so that it is solid and can support the more advanced skills you will learn later. You are building from the ground up, ensuring there are no critical gaps in your knowledge. This methodical approach is the fastest way to learn because it is the most efficient. You are not wasting time on advanced techniques you are not ready for, and you are not getting stuck because you missed a fundamental concept. The fourth and final step is to focus on and practice one and only one component at a time until you reach a good enough level. This is where your focus becomes a laser beam. Going back to our mountain analogy, you are now focused solely on walking to that first tree. You are not thinking about the stream, the rock formation, or the summit. All of your energy and attention is directed at this one small, immediate task. Using our drawing example, you would start with step 1, materials. You would spend a short amount of time learning what the different pencil grades, like 2H, HB, 4B, mean, and what kind of paper is good for drawing. Then you move to step 2, basic pencil control. For the next few practice sessions, you would do nothing but that. You would draw lines, circles, and squares. You would practice making smooth gradients from light to dark. You would fill entire pages with these exercises. You would not even think about drawing a face. Your entire world is just about making marks on paper. Your goal is not to become the world's greatest line drawer. Your goal is to reach a basic level of competence, to be good enough to move on to the next step. What does good enough mean? It means you are comfortable enough with the skill that it will not hold you back when you try to learn the next one. For pencil control, it might mean you can draw a reasonably straight line and create a smooth patch of shading. Once you feel you have reached that point, you put a check mark next to that item on your list and move on to the next one, understanding the proportions of the head. Now your focus shifts entirely. You would watch videos on the Loomis method. You would practice drawing the basic ball and plane structure of the head over and over again. You would not worry about shading or details. You would only focus on getting the basic shapes and placements right. You would stay on this step until you can draw a basic head structure from memory that looks reasonably proportionate. Then you check it off and move to the next item on your list. This hyper-focused approach is incredibly powerful. By isolating a single variable, you can learn it much more deeply and quickly. When you practice, you know exactly what you're trying to improve. If you are practicing proportions and you make a mistake, you know the problem is with your proportions, not your shading or your line work, because you are not even thinking about those things yet. This makes it much easier to identify your mistakes and correct them. It makes your practice sessions incredibly efficient. You are always working on your current weakness and turning it into a strength before moving on. This method of isolating and mastering one component at a time is perhaps the biggest secret of rapid learners. They do not multitask their practice. They single task. They conquer one hill, and then they move to the next, and this is how they eventually conquer the entire mountain. Let's look at a case study to see how this all comes together. Let's imagine Sarah, a young professional who wants to learn how to cook. Her initial goal is, I want to learn to cook. This is vague and intimidating. So she refines it using our first step. Her new goal is, in 60 days, I want to be able to confidently cook 3 different healthy and delicious meals from scratch without a recipe. This is a fantastic goal. It is specific and measurable. Next, for step 2, Sarah starts her research to deconstruct the skill of cooking these meals. She looks at online cooking courses for beginners, watches videos from famous chefs, and buys a foundational cookbook like Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. She notices that the best cooks do not just follow recipes, they understand principles. She sees patterns emerge. The core components she identifies are 1. Knife skills, how to safely and efficiently chop, dice, and mince vegetables. 2. Heat management, understanding how to control the temperature on her stove for different cooking methods. 3. Sautéing and pan frying, a basic cooking technique used in countless dishes. 4. Roasting, how to cook food in an oven. 5. Seasoning, understanding how to use salt, pepper, herbs, and spices to make food taste good. 6. Basic sauce making, creating simple pan sauces or vinaigrettes. For step 3, she sequences these components. She decides the most logical order is 1. Knife skills, because almost every recipe requires chopping. 2. Seasoning, learning the impact of salt early on is crucial. 3. Heat management, understanding the stove is fundamental. 4. Sautéing, a versatile and common technique. 5. Roasting, another fundamental cooking method. 6. Sauce making, a slightly more advanced skill that builds on the others. This is her personal curriculum. Finally, for step 4, she starts practicing one component at a time. For the first week, she does not try to cook a full meal. She only practices her knife skills. She buys a big bag of onions and potatoes and spends 15 minutes each evening just practicing chopping. She watches videos on how to hold the knife properly. Chapter 2. The power of focused practice. Quality over quantity. In the first chapter, we took our big, intimidating mountain of a skill and broke it down into a series of small, manageable hills. We created a map. But a map, no matter how detailed or accurate, is useless if you do not start walking. This chapter is about how to walk. It is about the engine that will drive you up that mountain, one step at a time. This chapter is about practice. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Practice? Of course I need to practice. Tell me something I do not know. We have all had the old saying, practice makes perfect, drilled into our heads since we were children. But I am here to tell you that this saying is one of the most misleading and dangerous half-truths in the world of learning. Practice does not make perfect. In fact, mindless, repetitive practice can actually be harmful. It can ingrain bad habits, lead to burnout, and make you hit a plateau that you may never break through. What we are going to talk about is a different kind of practice altogether. It is a type of practice that is focused, strategic, and often uncomfortable. But it is also the single most effective method for getting better at anything, fast. It is called deliberate practice, and it is the difference between spending 10 years playing the same 3 songs on the guitar and becoming a truly skilled musician in a fraction of that time. Let's start by dismantling a very popular myth, the 10,000-hour rule. You have probably heard of it. The idea, popularized by author Malcolm Gladwell, is that it takes roughly 10,000 hours of practice to achieve world-class expertise in any field. This idea is incredibly appealing because it is simple. It suggests a direct, linear relationship between the time you put in and the skill you get out. But the original research by Dr. K. Anders Ericsson, on which this rule was based, was far more nuanced. Ericsson never said that just logging 10,000 hours of any old activity would make you a master. He found that the top performers, the elite violinists, chess grandmasters, and athletes, did not just put in more hours, they put in a very specific kind of hour. Their hours were filled with what he termed deliberate practice. Meanwhile, many people spend well over 10,000 hours doing something in their lifetime, driving a car, for instance, without ever becoming world-class race car drivers. Why? Because after the initial learning phase, their driving becomes automatic. They are on autopilot. They are not actively trying to improve. They are just doing it. The hours they spend are empty hours. They are not engaged in deliberate practice. So, what is this magical thing called deliberate practice? Let me illustrate with a story. Imagine two aspiring basketball players, Alex and Ben. Both want to improve their free throw shooting. They go to the gym every day for an hour. Alex's approach is what most people would consider normal practice. He grabs a ball, stands at the free throw line, and shoots. He shoots again and again. He puts up about 150 shots in his hour. Some go in, some miss. He is listening to music on his headphones. He is kind of just going through the motions, hoping that by sheer repetition he will get better. He is logging the hours. Ben, on the other hand, takes a completely different approach. He has deconstructed the skill of free throw shooting. He knows it involves his stance, his grip, his arm extension, his follow-through, and his mental focus. Before his session, he sets a very specific goal. Today, I'm going to focus only on my follow-through. I want my shooting hand to end up high and straight, like I am reaching into a cookie jar on a high shelf, on every single shot. He does not listen to music. He brings only 10 basketballs with him. He shoots one shot. This is a concept called attention residue, and it means that for several minutes after a distraction, your brain is not operating at its full capacity. To practice deliberately, you need all of your cognitive resources. This means your phone needs to be in another room, turned off. All unnecessary tabs on your computer need to be closed. You should let your family or roommates know that you are in a focus session and should not be disturbed unless it is an emergency. This might seem extreme, but the best learners are ruthless about protecting their focus. 30 minutes of pure, uninterrupted practice is more valuable than 2 hours of fragmented, distracted practice. Guard your attention as if it were your most precious resource, because when it comes to learning, it is. Step 3 is to break the skill down even further and isolate your weaknesses. Let's say you are working on your piano goal. You try to play the first 8 bars, but you keep fumbling on the transition between the 3rd and 4th bar. The amateur move is to just keep playing the entire 8-bar phrase over and over, hoping you will eventually get it right. This is incredibly inefficient. The professional move, the deliberate practice move, is to stop and isolate the problem. You would focus only on that single transition, from the last note of the 3rd bar to the first note of the 4th bar. You would play just those 2 notes, back and forth slowly and perfectly. You might do this 20, 30, 50 times. You are putting a magnifying glass on your specific point of failure. You are drilling down on the weakness until it becomes a strength. Once you can play that tricky transition smoothly and automatically, you then integrate it back into the larger phrase. This method of isolating and conquering the hardest parts is a superpower. Most people avoid their weaknesses because it is frustrating. They like to practice the parts they are already good at because it feels good. Deliberate practitioners do the opposite. They actively seek out their weaknesses and attack them with focused effort. They understand that their rate of improvement is determined by how quickly they can identify and eliminate their weakest links. Step 4 is to embrace the mental strain and use strategic rest. As I mentioned, deliberate practice is hard work. It is not supposed to feel easy. You will feel a sense of mental fatigue, a kind of brain burn. This is a good sign. It means you are pushing your limits and forcing your brain to grow. However, you cannot maintain this intense focus indefinitely. This is why strategic rest is just as important as the practice itself. A highly effective method for structuring your practice is the Pomodoro technique. You set a timer for 25 minutes and work with intense focus on your specific goal for that entire period. When the timer goes off, you must stop. You then take a short 5-minute break. During this break, you should do something completely different. Get up, stretch, get a glass of water, look out the window. Do not check your phone or email, as that will pull you out of your focused state. After the 5-minute break, you start another 25-minute focus session. After 4 of these cycles, you take a longer break of 15 to 30 minutes. This technique works because it respects the natural rhythm of your brain's ability to focus. It allows you to work in short, powerful sprints, ensuring the quality of your attention remains high, while the breaks prevent burnout and help consolidate what you have just learned. Step 5 is to implement a feedback and reflection mechanism at the end of each session. The last 5 minutes of your practice time should be dedicated to this. Ask yourself a few simple questions. Did I achieve the specific goal I set for this session? What went well? What was the hardest part? What is the single biggest thing I need to work on in my next session? It can be incredibly helpful to keep a practice journal, either in a notebook or a simple document on your computer. Write down your goal, a few notes on how the session went, and what your goal will be for the next one. This act of reflection solidifies your learning. It helps you see patterns in your mistakes and makes you a more conscious and self-aware learner. It closes the loop on your practice, ensuring that each session is not an isolated event, but a building block that connects to the last one and sets the stage for the next. This simple habit of a 5-minute review can dramatically accelerate your progress because it forces you to learn from your own experience. You become your own coach. Let's see how this 5-step system could be applied to learning a new language, say Spanish. A beginner's vague goal might be, I want to get better at Spanish. Using our system, the goal for a 25-minute practice session becomes much more specific. I will learn the 10 most common regular are verbs and be able to conjugate them in the present tense for I, you, and he, she forms without looking at my notes. This is step 1. For step 2, they would find a quiet place, put their phone away, and close all other tabs. For step 3, they might notice they keep messing up the conjugation for the verb hablar, to speak. They would isolate that weakness and spend 5 minutes just writing out hablo, hablas, habla over and over again until it sticks. For step 4, they are using the Pomodoro technique, so their focus is intense for the 25 minutes, followed by a well-deserved break. For step 5, at the end of the session, they would test themselves. Can they conjugate those 10 verbs? Maybe they got 9 of them right, but still struggle with one. They would note that down in their journal. Succeeded with 9-10 verbs. Still struggling with trabajar. Next session's goal will be to master trabajar and review the other 9. This is a world away from just aimlessly flipping through a textbook for an hour. This is targeted, efficient, and measurable learning. You have to understand that your feelings can be a very poor guide during practice. On the days when you struggle the most, when you are making a lot of mistakes and feel frustrated, these are often the days you are making the most progress. You are deep in the stretch zone. Conversely, on days when practice feels easy and you feel like you are nailing everything, you might just be coasting in your comfort zone, which means you are not actually improving. You must learn to fall in love with the process of stretching yourself. You must reframe the feeling of struggle. It is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of growth. Every mistake is not a failure, it is a piece of data. It is information that is telling you exactly what you need to work on. The person who learns the fastest is the person who is willing to make the most mistakes and learn from them as quickly as possible. Do not be afraid to look foolish. Do not be afraid to fail. The only true failure in learning is the failure to practice deliberately. Remember, the goal is not to be perfect from day one. The goal is to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. And the way to do that is through short, consistent, and intensely focused bursts of deliberate practice. Consistency will always beat cramming. Practicing for 30 minutes every day is infinitely more effective than practicing for 4 hours once a week. This is because of how our brains build skills. The connections between our neurons that represent a skill are strengthened with repeated use and are consolidated during sleep. Short daily practice sessions feed this process perfectly. They keep the new connections active and give your brain a chance to strengthen them every single night. You now have the knowledge to make your practice time 10 times more productive. You know that simply putting in the hours is not enough. You know that you need to be in your stretch zone, focused, and getting feedback. You have a 5-step system to structure your sessions for maximum effectiveness. This is the engine of skill acquisition. In the last chapter, you learned how to create the map. Now, you know how to drive the car. You have the power to stop wasting your time with ineffective, mindless repetition and start practicing in a way that generates real, measurable results. The path to mastery is not a long, leisurely stroll. It is a series of short, intense, and purposeful climbs. It will be challenging. It will be demanding, but it will also be incredibly rewarding. The next time you sit down to practice, do not just practice. Practice with purpose, practice deliberately. Chapter 3, The Feedback Loop, your secret weapon for rapid improvement. Imagine you are trying to learn archery. You stand at the line, you load an arrow, you pull back the string, you aim carefully and you let it fly. The arrow sails through the air and hits the target, but here is the catch. The target is covered by a thick curtain. You can hear the thud as the arrow hits, but you have no idea where it landed. Was it a bullseye? Was it close? Did you miss the target entirely? You do not know. So you take another shot, and another, and another. You shoot 100 arrows, feeling your arm get stronger, feeling your stance become more stable. You are putting in the practice, you are focused. But are you getting any better? The answer is almost certainly no. You might be getting better at the physical act of shooting an arrow, but you are not getting any better at the skill of hitting the target, because you are missing the single most crucial ingredient for improvement: feedback. Without knowing where your last shot landed, you have no information to help you adjust your next shot. You are operating in a vacuum. Learning without feedback is like playing darts in the dark. You are just guessing, and hope is not a strategy. In the last chapter, we talked about deliberate practice. and one of its 4 core pillars was the need for immediate informative feedback. This concept is so vital, so transformative to the learning process, that it deserves its own entire chapter. If deconstruction gives you the map and deliberate practice provides the engine, then feedback is the guidance system. It is the sophisticated GPS that constantly tells you where you are, where you need to go, and makes real-time course corrections to keep you on the fastest possible path to your destination. Without it, you are simply driving fast in the wrong direction. You can practice deliberately for thousands of hours, but if you are practicing the wrong thing, you are just getting exceptionally good at making the same mistake. The fastest learners are not necessarily the ones who practice the most. They are the ones who build the tightest, fastest, and most effective feedback loops into their process. What exactly is a feedback loop? It is a simple 3-step cycle. First, you perform an action. Second, you gather information and feedback about that action. Third, you use that information to modify your next action. You shoot the arrow, you see where it landed, step 2, feedback, and you adjust your aim, your release, or your breathing for the next shot, step 3, modification. The faster and more accurately you can complete this loop, the more rapidly you will improve. The goal of this chapter is to teach you how to build powerful feedback loops for any skill you want to learn. We will explore where to get high-quality feedback, how to filter the good from the bad, and most importantly, how to overcome the emotional barriers that often prevent us from seeking and accepting the very information we need most to grow. Before we dive into the how, it is crucial to understand why feedback is so essential from a psychological perspective. The first reason is that we are all, by our very nature, terrible at accurately judging our own performance. We live inside our own heads, and our perception is clouded by ego, insecurity, and a lack of perspective. This is a well-documented phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. In essence, it states that people with low ability at a task tend to overestimate their ability. The beginner who has just learned 3 chords on the guitar might think they are pretty good, not realizing the vast universe of technique and musicality they are completely unaware of. They do not know what they do not know. They have blind spots. Feedback is the light that illuminates these blind spots. A good coach or mentor can see your performance with an objective, expert eye. They can instantly spot the subtle mistake in your grip or the slight hesitation in your voice that you are completely oblivious to. They can show you what good actually looks like, providing you with a clear target to aim for. Without this external perspective, you are trapped in the echo chamber of your own mind, unable to see the flaws that are holding you back. The second reason feedback is so powerful is that it provides a roadmap for what to work on. When you are learning something new, it can be overwhelming to know what you should focus on. A good piece of feedback cuts through the noise. Imagine you give a presentation and ask a trusted colleague for feedback. They might say, "The content was excellent, but you were speaking a little too fast and you kept rocking back and forth on your feet, which was distracting." This is a gift. You now have 2 very specific, high-leverage things to focus on in your deliberate practice. For your next practice session, you can set a specific goal. I will deliver the first 2 minutes of my presentation using a metronome to keep my pace slow, and I will stand with my feet firmly planted on the ground. You are no longer guessing what you need to improve. You have a clear, actionable instruction. High-quality feedback removes ambiguity and allows you to direct your practice energy where it will have the biggest impact. So, where do we get this game-changing feedback? There are 3 primary sources, and the best learners draw from all of them. These sources are experts and mentors, peers and yourself. Let's break down how to tap into each one. The first and most valuable source of feedback is from an expert, a coach, or a mentor. This is someone who has already walked the path you are on and has reached the destination. They have the deep knowledge and experience to diagnose your problems with precision and prescribe the right solutions. Getting a great coach is the ultimate learning shortcut. It is like compressing years of trial and error into a few pointed lessons. Finding a coach can be a formal process, like hiring a tennis coach or a music teacher. If you have the resources for this, it is often the best investment you can make in your skill development. But a mentor does not have to be a paid professional. It could be a senior colleague at your work, a friend who is an expert in the skill, or even someone you connect with in an online community. How do you find and approach a potential mentor? First, be specific in your search. Look for people who have achieved the specific outcome you want. Second, be respectful of their time. Do not send a vague message like, "Can you mentor me?" This is asking for a huge, undefined commitment. Instead, start by asking for a small, specific piece of feedback. For example, if you are learning web design, you could reach out to a designer whose work you admire and say something like, "Hi, name. I'm a huge admirer of your work, especially specific project. I am currently learning web design and I've just completed my first portfolio piece. I know you're incredibly busy, but would you be willing to take a quick 3-minute look and tell me the single biggest area for improvement you see? Here is the link." This approach is much more likely to get a positive response. It is specific, it shows you have done your homework, and it asks for a very small and manageable commitment. If they provide feedback, thank them profusely, and most importantly, go and implement their advice. Later, you can follow up and show them the progress you have made based on their suggestion. This builds a relationship based on respect and action, which can often evolve into a more informal mentorship over time. The second source of feedback is your peers. These are other people who are at a similar stage of learning as you are. While they may not have the deep expertise of a mentor, they offer several unique advantages. First, they are more accessible. It is much easier to find a learning buddy than a world-class expert. Second, the act of giving feedback to others is one of the most powerful ways to deepen your own understanding. When you have to analyze a peer's work and articulate what is good or bad about it, you are forced to clarify your own mental models of the skill. Third, peers can provide a crucial source of motivation and accountability. It is much easier to stick with your practice when you know you have a meeting with your feedback group next week. How do you create an effective peer feedback system? Find 1 to 3 other people who are serious about learning the same skill. You can find them in online courses, forums, or local meetups. Set up a regular schedule for meeting, perhaps once a week or every 2 weeks, either in person or online. Establish clear ground rules for giving feedback. A great model is the sandwich method. You start with a specific and genuine piece of positive feedback, the top slice of bread. Then, you provide a specific and actionable piece of constructive criticism, the meat. Finally, you end with another piece of positive, encouraging feedback, the bottom slice. For example, instead of saying your essay was confusing, you might say, "I really liked your opening paragraph, it had a great hook." Positive. "I found myself getting a bit lost in the second section. Maybe adding a clearer topic sentence to each paragraph would help guide the reader." Constructive criticism. Overall, the core idea is really strong, and you have some powerful evidence to support it. Positive. This structure makes the feedback easier to hear and more likely to be acted upon. The third and most frequently available source of feedback is yourself. Becoming skilled at self-assessment is a hallmark of an expert learner. While it is true that we have blind spots, there are powerful techniques we can use to see our own performance more objectively. The single most effective method for this is to record yourself. This is a game changer for any performance-based skill. If you are learning public speaking, record a video of yourself. If you are learning a musical instrument, record the audio. If you are learning a sport, have someone film your movements. If you are learning to code, use screen recording software to capture your process. When you review the recording, you are no longer the performer. You become the coach. You are an objective third-party observer. You will be amazed at what you see. The public speaker will notice all the ums and ahs they were completely unaware of. The pianist will hear the subtle timing errors that were masked by the intensity of playing. The tennis player will see the flaw in their backswing that they could not feel in the moment. When you review your recording, have a specific checklist of things to look for. This checklist should be based on the core components you identified back in Chapter 1. For our public speaking example, the checklist might include pace, vocal variety, filler words, eye contact, and body language. Watch the recording once for each item on the list. This focused approach prevents you from getting overwhelmed and helps you identify specific areas for improvement. This process can be uncomfortable. It is often cringe-worthy to watch yourself on video, but you must push through that discomfort. The insights you will gain are pure gold. This act of recording and reviewing is one of the tightest possible feedback loops you can create, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. Now, having access to feedback is one thing. Being able to receive it and use it is another. For many of us, receiving criticism is emotionally difficult. It can feel like a personal attack. Our defenses go up, we get angry, and we want to argue or dismiss the feedback. This is a natural human reaction, but it is also the biggest obstacle to growth. To become a rapid learner, you must reframe your relationship with feedback. You must learn to see it not as criticism of you as a person, but as valuable, objective data about your performance. It is a gift that someone is giving you to help you get better. Here are a few practical strategies for receiving feedback effectively. First, prepare yourself beforehand by adopting a growth mindset. Before you go into a feedback session, remind yourself, this is not about judging me. This is about helping me improve. I am open to learning. This simple mental shift can make a world of difference in how you interpret the information you're about to receive. Second, during the session, your primary job is to listen to understand, not to formulate a reply. Fight the urge to interrupt, justify your actions, or make excuses. Just listen. Take notes. Your goal is to fully understand the other person's perspective. If something is unclear, ask clarifying questions. For example, if they say your writing lacks flow, you could ask, "That is really helpful. Could you show me an example of a sentence or a transition that felt particularly jarring to you?" This shows that you are engaged and value their input. Third, after the session, always say thank you. The person giving you feedback has invested their time and mental energy to help you. Acknowledging that and showing gratitude makes them far more likely to want to help you again in the future. Fourth, once you have the feedback, you need to process it. Not all feedback is created equal. You must learn to separate the signal from the noise. Consider the source. Does the person have expertise in this area? Is their feedback based on objective observation or just personal opinion? Does the feedback align with your specific goals? You do not have to act on every single piece of advice you receive. Your job is to analyze it, compare it with feedback from other sources, and decide what is most relevant to you right now. Finally, and this is the most important step, you must take action. Feedback is useless if it does not lead to a change in your behavior. The entire purpose of the feedback loop is to modify your next attempt. After processing the feedback, identify the single most important, highest leverage thing you need to work on. Do not try to fix 10 things at once. Pick one. Then design your next deliberate practice session around fixing that one thing. For example, if the feedback was that your tennis serve toss is inconsistent, your entire next practice session should be dedicated to nothing but the toss. You would toss the ball up, let it drop, and repeat over and over until you can do it perfectly. Then you would report back to your coach or mentor and say, "Thank you for the feedback on my toss. I spent the last week working exclusively on it. Would you mind taking another look?" This closes the loop. It shows the person who gave you the feedback that you valued it and took action, and it invites them to give you the next piece of the puzzle. This cycle of seeking feedback, taking focused action, and then seeking more feedback is the very essence of rapid improvement. Let's be clear, this process is not easy. Actively seeking out your own flaws is a courageous act. It requires humility and a willingness to be vulnerable. It is much more comfortable to stay in our bubble and believe we are doing just fine. But comfort is the enemy of growth. The path to mastery is paved with the stones of constructive criticism. You must learn to love the feedback, to crave it, because you understand that it is the fuel for your journey. Every piece of constructive feedback, no matter how hard it is to hear, is a clue that gets you one step closer to your goal. So I challenge you to change your perspective. Stop avoiding feedback and start hunting for it. Make it your mission to find out what you are doing wrong. Ask your colleagues, find a mentor, join a peer group, and record yourself. Build these feedback loops into your learning process, and you will stop wandering aimlessly in the wilderness of trial and error. You will be on the direct, illuminated path to skill mastery, moving with a speed and precision you never thought possible. Chapter 4. Hacking your brain, strategies for enhanced memory and retention. We have now learned how to deconstruct any skill into its fundamental parts, creating a clear map for our learning journey. We have also discovered the engine of progress, the powerful methodology of deliberate practice. And we have equipped ourselves with a sophisticated GPS in the form of feedback loops. We have the map, the engine, and the guidance system. But what about the vehicle itself? What about the intricate, mysterious, and miraculous machine that is actually doing all the learning? I am talking, of course, about your brain. For too long, most of us have treated our brains like a black box. We put information in, we hope it sticks, and we get frustrated when it does not. We act as if the process of memory and learning is something that just happens to us, something that is outside of our control. We might say things like, "I just have a bad memory," as if it were a fixed, unchangeable trait, like our height or our eye color. Today, we are going to shatter that myth forever. Your brain is not a passive vessel waiting to be filled. It is an active, dynamic system, a living garden that you can learn to cultivate. You can be a passive gardener, throwing seeds of information onto the ground and hoping for the best, letting weeds grow and wondering why your plants are not thriving. Or you can become an active, intelligent gardener. You can learn to prepare the soil, to provide the right amount of water and sunlight, and to protect your plants from pests. The result will be a lush, vibrant garden where knowledge and skills grow strong and healthy. This chapter is your manual for becoming that intelligent gardener. We are going to move beyond simply practicing a skill and start learning how to optimize the very organ that is responsible for acquiring it. We are going to explore a series of powerful, science-backed strategies that will allow you to forge stronger, more durable memories so that the skills you work so hard to learn actually stick. This is not about being born with a good memory. This is about using the brain you have, but using it in a way that is aligned with its own natural operating instructions. By the end of this chapter, you will no longer see your brain as a limitation, but as your ultimate superpower, one that you can consciously and deliberately upgrade. The first and most foundational strategy for enhancing your brain's ability to learn has almost nothing to do with the act of studying itself. It is something we spend roughly a third of our lives doing, yet it is often the first thing we sacrifice when we get busy. I am talking about sleep. In our hustle culture, sleep is often viewed as a luxury, a necessary evil, or even a sign of laziness. We are told to rise and grind, and that you can sleep when you are dead. This is not just bad advice, it is catastrophically ignorant of the fundamental neuroscience of learning. Sacrificing sleep to get in an extra hour of practice or study is like trying to build a house by taking bricks out of its foundation. You are actively sabotaging the very process you are trying to engage in. Let's get into the simple science of what happens in your brain while you sleep. When you are awake and learning, your brain is like a busy construction site. You are forming new connections between your brain cells or neurons. These connections, called synapses, are the physical basis of memory. Every new piece of information, every new movement you practice, creates a faint new neural pathway. During the day, your brain creates thousands of these new, weak connections. The problem is, your brain has limited space and energy. It cannot keep all of them. It needs a way to sort through the day's experiences, decide what is important, and discard the rest. This is where sleep comes in. Think of it as your brain's nightly cleaning and organizing crew. During the deep stages of sleep, something remarkable happens. Your brain cells actually shrink, which increases the space between them. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to wash through your brain, clearing out metabolic waste products that build up during the day. It is literally a brainwashing process. More importantly for our purposes, sleep is when memory consolidation occurs. Your brain replays the neural patterns of the things you learned during the day, strengthening the important connections and pruning away the unimportant ones. The faint pencil sketch of a memory you made while you were practicing is traced over again and again with permanent ink while you sleep. This is why you can struggle with a difficult piece of music or a complex math problem for hours, go to bed frustrated, and then wake up the next morning and be able to solve it with surprising ease. Your brain was practicing it all night long, without your conscious awareness. A fascinating study from the University of California, Berkeley, perfectly illustrates this. Researchers taught a group of participants a complex finger-tapping sequence, a motor skill similar to playing a piano chord. They then split the group in two. One half was allowed to take a 90-minute nap after the learning session, while the other half stayed awake. When they were tested later that day, the group that napped showed significant improvement in their performance, far beyond what the non-napping group showed. But here is the really incredible part. When they were tested again the next day, the nappers had not only retained their skill, but had actually gotten even better, while the non-nappers' performance had degraded. The sleep had not only solidified the learning from the day before, but had actually enhanced it. This applies to every kind of skill, from cognitive skills like learning a language to physical skills like mastering a golf swing. Sleep is not a passive state of rest. It is an active and essential state of memory enhancement. So how do we become masters of sleep to accelerate our learning? It is not just about getting more sleep. It is about getting higher quality sleep. Here are the actionable, non-negotiable rules for cultivating a brain-enhancing sleep routine. First, consistency is king. Your body has an internal clock called the circadian rhythm. It thrives on regularity. Try to go to bed and wake up at the same time every single day, even on weekends. This stabilizes your rhythm and improves the quality of your sleep. Sleeping in until noon on Sunday might feel good in the moment, but it is like giving yourself a small dose of jet lag, and it makes it much harder to get up on Monday morning. Second, create a cool, dark, and quiet sanctuary. Your body temperature naturally needs to drop to initiate sleep. Keep your bedroom temperature on the cooler side. Use blackout curtains or an eye mask to block out all light, as even small amounts of light can disrupt the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone. And use earplugs or a white noise machine to block out any disruptive sounds. Your bedroom should be a cave, used for sleep and intimacy only. Third, develop a relaxing wind-down routine. You cannot expect your brain to go from 100 to 0 in 5 minutes. You need a buffer zone between the stress of the day and the rest of the night. For the last hour before bed, you need to turn off all electronic screens. The blue light emitted by your phone, tablet, and computer is particularly disruptive to melatonin production. It essentially tricks your brain into thinking it is still daytime. Instead of scrolling through social media, read a physical book, not on a backlit device. Listen to calming music, do some light stretching, meditate, or take a warm bath. This signals to your brain that it is time to power down. Fourth, be mindful of what you consume in the evening. Avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. It has a surprisingly long half-life and can still be affecting your system many hours later. Also, avoid large meals or excessive alcohol close to bedtime. While alcohol might make you feel sleepy initially, it severely disrupts the quality of your sleep later in the night, particularly the REM sleep that is so crucial for memory consolidation. Viewing sleep as a critical part of your practice and not an obstacle to it will fundamentally change your learning trajectory. Protect your sleep as if your skill depended on it, because it does. Now that we have prepared the soil of our brain with good sleep, let's talk about how we plant the seeds of knowledge more effectively. The most common method of studying in the world is also one of the least effective. It is called passive review. This is what you are doing when you reread a chapter in a textbook, rewatch a lecture video, or go over your notes. It feels productive. The material is familiar, so you get a comforting sense of fluency. You think to yourself, yes, I know this stuff, but this feeling of fluency is an illusion. You are not actually testing your knowledge, you are just recognizing the material. Recognizing something is a much lower level cognitive process than being able to recall it from scratch. This is why so many students can spend hours rereading their notes, feel completely confident, and then walk into an exam and find their mind is a complete blank. They cannot retrieve the information because they never practiced retrieving it. The antidote to this ineffective method is a powerful strategy called active recall, also known as retrieval practice. Active recall is the act of actively trying to pull information out of your brain, rather than just passively putting it in. It is the difference between reading a map and trying to draw the map from memory. The second activity is much harder. It feels less productive. It will expose the gaps in your knowledge, which can be uncomfortable. But it is this very act of struggling to retrieve information that strengthens the neural pathway to that information. Every time you successfully recall a piece of information, you are telling your brain, "This is important." Keep this connection strong. It is like walking a path through a grassy field. The first time you walk it, you create a faint trail. If you just look at the trail from a distance, passive review, it will soon be overgrown. But if you walk that same path again and again, active recall, you will forge a clear, well-worn, and permanent path. So how do we incorporate active recall into our learning? There are many simple and incredibly effective techniques. The first and most famous is the use of flashcards. But there is a right way and a wrong way to use them. The wrong way is to simply flip through a stack, look at the answer and say, "Oh yeah, I knew that." The right way is to force yourself to vocalize the answer out loud, from memory, before you turn the card over. You must make a committed attempt. If you get it right, great. If you get it wrong, you have just identified a weakness, which is a valuable piece of feedback. You should then spend a moment thinking about why you got it wrong before putting that card in a separate pile to be reviewed more frequently. This simple act of forcing retrieval turns a passive review tool into a powerful active recall engine. A second, more conceptual technique is known as the Feynman technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who was renowned for his ability to explain complex ideas in simple terms. The technique has 4 steps. First, choose a concept you want to learn. Second, try to explain it to a complete beginner, like a child, using simple language and analogies. You can do this by writing it out on a piece of paper or by literally speaking it out loud to an empty room. Third, whenever you get stuck or you have to resort to complex jargon, you have identified a gap in your understanding. This is the crucial step. You must go back to your source material, your textbook, your notes, the lecture, and relearn that specific part until you can explain it simply. Fourth, review and simplify your explanation further. The goal is to create a simple, elegant explanation that even someone with no background in the subject could understand. This technique is brutally effective because it makes it impossible to hide behind a false sense of fluency. You cannot explain something simply if you do not understand it deeply. It is the ultimate test of your own knowledge. A third active recall strategy is to become your own teacher. At the end of a study session or after reading a chapter, close the book, put away your notes and take out a blank piece of paper. Then write down everything you can remember about the topic. This is sometimes called a brain dump. Do not worry about structure or neatness. Just get as much information out of your head and onto the paper as you can. When you can't remember anymore, go back to your source material and check your work. What did you get right? What did you get wrong? What important concepts did you miss entirely? This exercise gives you an incredibly accurate snapshot of what is actually in your brain, as opposed to what you think is in your brain. It reveals your weaknesses with pinpoint accuracy, telling you exactly what you need to review. You can also do this by simply summarizing the key points of what you just learned out loud, as if you were teaching it to a friend. The act of verbalizing and structuring the information forces your brain to work with it in a much deeper way than just passively reading it. These active recall techniques should become the cornerstone of your study and practice sessions. A good rule of thumb is to spend about 1/3 of your time taking in new information, reading, watching lectures, and 2/3 of your time actively recalling and working with that information, doing flashcards, using the Feynman technique, self-quizzing. This might feel slower at first, but the long-term retention you will gain is immeasurable. You will be building a solid, durable foundation of knowledge, not a fragile house of cards built on the illusion of fluency. Closely related to active recall is the concept of spaced repetition. Our brains are not designed to learn something once and remember it forever. We forget things. In fact, we forget things at a predictable rate. This was first studied by the psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus in the 19th century, who created what is known as the forgetting curve. The curve shows that after you learn something new, your memory of it declines rapidly at first, and then the rate of forgetting slows down over time. If you do not review the information, you will forget most of it within a few days. However, if you review the information just as you are about to forget it, you will reset the curve. And here is the magic part. Each time you do this, the rate of forgetting becomes slower. The memory becomes stronger. You might need to review a new vocabulary word after 1 day, then again after 3 days, then after a week, then after a month, and so on. By spacing out your reviews at increasing intervals, you can keep the information fresh in your mind with the minimum possible number of repetitions. This is an incredibly efficient way to learn. This contrasts sharply with the common practice of cramming. When you cram for an exam, you're trying to stuff a huge amount of information into your short-term memory in one massive session. You might be able to retain it long enough to pass the test the next day, but a week later, almost all of it will be gone. The forgetting curve for crammed information is incredibly steep. Spaced repetition, on the other hand, is designed to transfer information from your fragile short-term memory into your robust long-term memory. How can you implement spaced repetition? For things like facts and vocabulary, you can use digital flashcard apps like Anki or Quizlet, which have built-in algorithms that automatically schedule your reviews based on your performance. They will show you the cards you're about to forget more often and the cards you know well less often. This takes all the guesswork out of the process. For more conceptual skills, you can create a manual review schedule. For example, if you are learning a new concept in coding, you might plan to do a quick practice problem related to it on day 2, day 5, and day 10. The key is to be intentional about revisiting the material over time. Do not just learn it and move on. Interleave your review of old material with your learning of new material. This brings us to our next brain hack: interleaving. Traditional practice is often done in blocks. This is called blocked practice. If you are learning to play tennis, you might spend 30 minutes practicing only your forehand, then 30 minutes practicing only your backhand, and then 30 minutes practicing only your serve. This feels very productive. During the 30 minutes of forehand practice, you will see rapid improvement. You are getting into a rhythm, and by the end of the block, you will feel like a forehand master. The problem is that this kind of practice does not prepare you for the reality of a real game. In a game, you never hit 20 forehands in a row. You hit a forehand, then a backhand, then you have to run up for a short ball, then you hit a serve. The game is random and unpredictable. Interleaving is the opposite of blocked practice. Instead of practicing one thing at a time, you mix up different skills within the same practice session. So, our tennis player using interleaving would hit a few forehands, then a few backhands, then a few serves, and then repeat the cycle in a random order. This type of practice feels much harder. It is more frustrating. Your performance during the practice session will actually be worse than it would be with blocked practice. You will not get into a nice rhythm. You will be making more mistakes. This is what scientists call a desirable difficulty. The short-term struggle leads to much better long-term learning and performance. Why does it work? Because interleaving forces your brain to constantly load and reload different motor programs or mental models. It cannot just go on autopilot. For each shot, it has to assess the situation and choose the correct response from its entire toolkit. This is exactly what it has to do in a real game. Interleaving creates a more flexible and adaptable skill that can be recalled and applied in a real-world context, not just in the sterile environment of a practice drill. You can apply interleaving to almost any skill. If you are learning math, instead of doing a block of 20 problems on addition, then 20 on subtraction, then 20 on multiplication, you should use a worksheet that mixes all the problem types together. This forces you to learn how to identify which strategy is needed for each problem. If you are learning a musical instrument, instead of practicing your scales for 15 minutes, then your chords for 15 minutes, then a song for 15 minutes, you should interleave them. Practice a scale, then a few chords, then a small section of the song, and then repeat. This will more closely mimic the act of actually playing music. If you are learning to paint, you could switch between practicing your brush strokes, studying color theory, and working on composition, all within the same session. Blocked practice will make you feel better during practice, but interleaving will make you perform better when it actually counts. You have to be willing to trade short-term comfort for long-term competence. The final set of strategies I want to share are techniques for making information more memorable in the first place. These are classic mnemonic devices that have been used for thousands of years, and they work by tapping into the brain's natural strengths, particularly its powerful visual and spatial memory systems. Our brains are not very good at remembering abstract, boring information, but they are fantastic at remembering vivid, unusual, and emotionally charged images. The trick is to take the boring information you need to learn and translate it into a format that your brain is good at remembering. One way to do this is through association and visualization. Let's say you are a medical student and you need to remember that the fibula is the smaller of the two bones in the lower leg. The word fibula is abstract, but you could create an association. You could tell yourself a little fib. A fib is a small lie. The fibula is the smaller bone. To make this even stickier, you could create a vivid mental image. Imagine a small child telling a lie, a little fib, and their nose, like Pinocchio's, suddenly turns into a tiny bone, the fibula. It is a bizarre, silly, and slightly emotional image. And for that very reason, you are unlikely to ever forget it. The more absurd, exaggerated, and multi-sensory you can make your mental images, the better. For learning lists of things, you can use acronyms or acrostics. To remember the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, you can use the acronym ROY-G-BIV. To remember the order of the planets, you can use the acrostic sentence, "My very educated mother just served us noodles." These simple tricks work by organizing information and giving you a retrieval cue. But perhaps the most powerful mnemonic technique of all is the memory palace, or the method of loci. This technique was used by ancient Greek and Roman orators to memorize speeches that were hours long. It works by taking a physical location that you know extremely well, like your own house, and using it as a mental filing cabinet for the information you want to remember. Here is how it works. First, choose a location you can visualize in vivid detail. Let's use your home. Second, define a specific route through that location. For example, you might start at your front door, walk into the hallway, then into the living room, then into the kitchen, and so on. You must always follow the exact same route. Third, take the list of items you want to remember, and for each item create a bizarre, vivid image and place it at a specific location or locus along your route. Let's say you need to memorize the first 5 presidents of the United States: Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. You would start at your front door. You imagine a giant washing machine for Washington crashing through your door, spewing soap suds everywhere. A ridiculous, memorable image. You then walk into your hallway. On the hallway table, you see an atom, for Adams, glowing and pulsating with a strange energy. You walk into your living room and your favorite chef, for Jefferson, Chef Erson, is standing on your coffee table, frantically cooking a meal. You go into your kitchen and you see a giant angry doll, a mad doll for Madison, throwing your pots and pans around the room. Finally, you look at your kitchen sink and you see Marilyn Monroe, for Monroe, bathing in the sink, splashing water everywhere. To recall the list, all you have to do is take a mental walk through your house. You will see the washing machine, the atom, the chef, the mad doll, and Marilyn Monroe. The information is now linked to your powerful spatial memory. This technique requires some imagination up front, but it allows you to memorize vast amounts of information with perfect recall, in order. You are now equipped with a powerful toolkit of cognitive strategies. You know that sleep is not a waste of time, but a critical component of learning. You understand the profound difference between the illusion of fluency from passive review and the deep, durable knowledge built by active recall. You have learned how to use the efficiency of spaced repetition and the real-world effectiveness of interleaving, and you have a set of powerful mnemonic techniques to make even the most boring information stick. You are no longer a passive passenger in your own learning journey. You are the pilot. You are the architect of your own mind. By consciously applying these strategies, you are no longer just practicing a skill. You are fundamentally changing the structure of your brain. You are hacking the system to learn better, faster, and more effectively than you ever thought possible. Chapter 5. Overcoming plateaus and staying motivated. The marathon mindset. There is a predictable and universal story in the journey of learning any new skill. It begins with a spark of excitement. You have just deconstructed your goal, you are fired up, and you dive into your practice with enthusiasm. In these early days, progress comes quickly. It is thrilling. Every practice session yields a noticeable improvement. If you are learning guitar, you go from not being able to hold the instrument properly to being able to play a simple chord. A week later, you can switch between 3 chords. You feel like a rock star. This is the honeymoon phase of learning. Your brain is a sponge, soaking up the new information, and the reward for your effort is immediate and obvious. It feels easy. It feels like you could continue on this steep upward curve forever, and you will be a master in no time. And then one day, it stops. The rapid progress suddenly slows to a crawl. You practice for a whole week, and you feel like you have not improved at all. The chord changes that were getting smoother now feel clumsy again. The vocabulary words you thought you had memorized keep slipping away. You are putting in the same amount of effort, maybe even more, but you are not getting the same results. You have hit a wall. You have hit a plateau. This is the most dangerous moment in any learning journey. It is the point where frustration sets in. It is where your initial motivation begins to wane. It is where the voice of self-doubt starts to whisper in your ear, "See, I knew I could not do this. I am just not talented enough. Maybe I should just quit." This is the great filter that separates those who eventually achieve mastery from those who give up and relegate their guitar to a dusty corner of the room. This chapter is about how to break through that filter. It is about understanding what plateaus are, why they are a necessary and even positive part of the learning process, and how to develop the strategies and the mindset to push through them. It is about trading the short-term thrill of the sprint for the long-term resilience of the marathon. The first and most important step in conquering plateaus is to completely reframe how you think about them. A plateau is not a sign that you have stopped learning. It is not a sign of failure. In most cases, a plateau is actually a sign of success. It is a sign that your brain has successfully automated the skills you have been practicing up to this point. Think about when you first learned to drive a car. It required your absolute, full concentration. You had to consciously think about the pressure on the accelerator, the position of your hands on the wheel, checking the mirrors, and so on. It was mentally exhausting. But after a few months, you could do all of those things without thinking. The skills became automatic. Your brain, in its quest for efficiency, had bundled all those micro skills into a single program called driving. When a skill becomes automatic, it requires very little conscious effort, which frees up your mental resources. This is a good thing, but it also means you stop consciously improving it. A plateau is often simply the point at which your current skill set has become fully automated. You have squeezed all the easy gains out of your current approach. From a neurological perspective, a plateau is a period of consolidation. Your brain has built a new set of neural pathways, and now it is working to make them more efficient. It is strengthening the connections, wrapping them in a fatty sheath called myelin, which makes the signals travel faster and more reliably. This process does not always feel like forward progress, but it is absolutely essential work being done behind the scenes. It is like a construction crew that has just finished framing a house. From the outside, it might look like work has stopped for a few days, but on the inside, the electricians and plumbers are laying the critical groundwork for the next stage of construction. A plateau is your brain laying the foundation for the next level of skill. So the first rule of plateaus is, do not panic. Do not interpret them as a sign of failure. Instead, learn to recognize them for what they are, a normal, natural, and necessary resting point on the upward path to mastery. It is a signal that it is time to change your approach. The methods that got you to the plateau will not be the ones that get you off it. So, how do we get off the plateau? How do we kickstart our progress again? The answer is to consciously and deliberately break the automaticity that we have worked so hard to build. We need to jolt the system, to introduce new challenges that force our brain out of its comfort zone and back into the active learning state of a beginner. Here are some of the most powerful strategies for breaking through any learning plateau. The first strategy is to go back to the absolute fundamentals. Often, a plateau is not caused by a weakness in the advanced skills you are currently working on, but by a subtle flaw in a foundational skill that you learned early on. This small flaw might not have been a problem at the beginner level, but now, as you try to build more complex skills on top of it, that weak foundation is limiting your progress. It is like a skyscraper with a small crack in its base. The first few floors might go up fine, but as you build higher, the entire structure becomes unstable. For example, a tennis player might hit a plateau with the power of their serve. They might try to swing harder and harder with no results. The real problem might not be their swing at all, but a tiny, inconsistent flaw in their ball toss. Because the toss is inconsistent, they are never able to hit the ball at the optimal point. The solution is not to practice the advanced skill of swinging harder, but to go back to the humiliatingly simple, fundamental skill of just tossing the ball up perfectly, over and over again. To do this, you need to conduct an honest audit of your skills. Go back to the deconstructed list of components you created in Chapter 1. Go through them one by one, from the very beginning. For each fundamental skill, ask yourself, am I truly a master of this? Is there any weakness here? It can be incredibly helpful to use the record and review technique from our chapter on feedback. Record yourself performing these basic skills and watch with a critical eye. You will likely be surprised to find sloppy habits that have crept in over time. Once you identify a weak fundamental, you must attack it with focused, deliberate practice. Dedicate entire practice sessions to just that one simple skill. This can feel like a step backward, and your ego might resist it. But it is the only way to repair the crack in your foundation so you can continue building upward. Sometimes to move forward, you must first take a step back. The second strategy is to introduce novelty and change your context. When your practice becomes too routine, your brain goes on autopilot. To break out of this, you need to change the variables. Even small changes can force your brain to pay attention again. Try practicing at a different time of day. If you always practice in the morning, try an evening session. Try practicing in a different location. If you always play guitar in your bedroom, take it to a park. The new sensory inputs will make the experience novel again. Change your tools. If you are learning to draw with a specific type of pencil, try using a completely different medium, like charcoal or ink. This will force you to solve problems in a new way and can reveal new insights about your primary skill. A more powerful form of this strategy is to dramatically change the challenge itself. You need to find new ways to push yourself that are different from just trying to do the same thing better. One way is to add constraints. For example, if you are a writer who has hit a plateau, try writing a short story without using the letter E. This absurd constraint will force you to access a completely different part of your vocabulary and be more creative with your sentence structure. If you are a coder, try to solve a problem you have already solved, but this time you are constrained to using half as many lines of code. Constraints breed creativity and force you out of your well-worn mental ruts. Another way is to increase the speed. Use a metronome and try to perform the skill just slightly faster than is comfortable. This will often shatter your current form and reveal your hidden weaknesses. Conversely, you can also slow things down dramatically. Try to perform the skill at a glacial pace, paying exquisite attention to every single micro movement. This hyper-awareness can help you refine your technique in a way that is impossible at normal speed. The key is to break your routine. A plateau is a rut. To get out of a rut, you have to steer the wheel in a different direction. The third and perhaps counterintuitive strategy is to take a strategic break. When you are deep in the struggle of a plateau, your instinct is often to double down, to practice harder and longer. Sometimes, this is the exact wrong thing to do. You can get so locked into a problem that you lose all perspective. This is when mental fatigue sets in, and you end up just banging your head against the wall, reinforcing bad habits and increasing your frustration. In this situation, one of the most productive things you can do is to walk away. I do not mean for an hour. I mean for a few days or even a full week. Step away from the skill completely. Do not practice it. Do not even think about it. Engage in other activities, rest, and let your brain's background processing do its work. This is a concept known as incubation. When you give your conscious mind a rest from a difficult problem, Your unconscious mind continues to work on it, making new connections and exploring different possibilities. This is why the solution to a problem often comes to you in a flash of insight when you are doing something completely unrelated, like taking a shower or going for a walk. A short break also helps to wash away the frustration and fatigue associated with the plateau. When you come back to the skill after a week off, you will do so with a fresh perspective, renewed energy, and a more positive mindset. You will also have the benefit of all the memory consolidation that happened during your sleep that week. It is amazing how often a problem that seemed impossible a week ago can feel surprisingly manageable after a well-timed break. Do not be afraid to rest. Strategic rest is not quitting. It is a sophisticated tool for advanced learners. While these practical strategies are crucial for breaking through the technical aspects of a plateau, they are useless if you have lost the will to even try them. The psychological side of this equation is just as, if not more, important. Plateaus are above all a test of your motivation. This brings us to the core of the marathon mindset. You must have a reason to keep running when the finish line is nowhere in sight. This is where you must connect with your why. Your why is your deep, intrinsic reason for learning this skill in the first place. It is not a superficial goal like, I want to get a promotion or I want to impress my friends. Those are extrinsic motivators, and while they can be useful to get you started, they are like kindling. They burn hot and fast, but they will not sustain you through the long, cold night of a plateau. You need to find the hardwood, the intrinsic motivation that burns slowly and steadily. Your why has to be something that is deeply meaningful to you, something that connects to your values, your identity, or your sense of purpose. I want you to take a moment and go through an exercise. Take out a piece of paper. At the top, write down the skill you are trying to learn. Underneath it, write down the answer to this question. What will mastering this skill allow me to do, create, or become that is truly important to me? Do not just write down the first thing that comes to mind. Keep digging. Use the 5 whys technique. If your answer is, I want to learn to code to get a better job, ask yourself, why is getting a better job important to me? Maybe the answer is, so I can provide a better life for my family. Ask again, why is providing a better life for my family important to me? Maybe the answer is, because my greatest value in life is being a good and supportive parent. Now we are getting somewhere. This deep core value is your why. It is the emotional fuel that will keep you going when your progress stalls. When you are feeling frustrated and want to quit, you can remind yourself, I am not just debugging a piece of code. I am doing this to be the parent I want to be. This transforms a frustrating task into a meaningful act. Your why is your anchor in the storm of frustration. You must find it, write it down, and put it somewhere you can see it every day. Once you have your why, you need to support it with a sustainable system for practice. One of the biggest mistakes people make is relying solely on motivation to drive their actions. Motivation is a fickle emotion. It comes and goes. You cannot build long-term success on a foundation of something so unreliable. Instead, you need to build systems and habits that make showing up automatic, regardless of how motivated you feel on any given day. As James Clear writes in his masterpiece, Atomic Habits, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. A goal is a target, like, I want to learn to speak French. A system is the repeatable process you follow, like, every morning after I brush my teeth, I will do one 20-minute lesson on my language app. The person who relies on the system will always outperform the person who relies on the goal, because the system carries them through the days when motivation is absent. How do you build a good system? First, make it incredibly easy to start. This is a concept called habit stacking. Link your new practice habit to an existing solid habit. For example, after I pour my morning coffee, existing habit, I will sit down and write for 15 minutes, new habit. Second, shrink the habit down until it is ridiculously small. Your goal is not to practice for an hour a day from the start. Your goal is to simply show up and get started. Make the habit, put on my running shoes and step outside, or open my sketchbook to a blank page. Anyone can do that, even on their worst day. This 2-minute rule helps you overcome the initial inertia, which is often the hardest part. Once you have started, you will often find you want to continue for longer. The goal is to master the art of showing up. Consistency is far more important than intensity, especially in the beginning. Another key to maintaining long-term motivation is to learn to celebrate your small wins. Our brains are wired to repeat actions that lead to rewards. When you are in the honeymoon phase of learning, the progress itself is the reward. But on a plateau, that external reward disappears. So, you have to create your own. You need to break down your journey into tiny, achievable milestones and then consciously acknowledge and celebrate when you hit them. Maybe you finally nailed that tricky chord change. Do not just move on to the next thing. Stop for a moment. Acknowledge it. Tell yourself, yes, I did it. This small act of self-reinforcement releases a little bit of dopamine in your brain, which strengthens the neural circuits associated with that action and increases your motivation to do it again. You can also create external rewards. If I stick to my practice schedule for 5 days in a row, I will treat myself to my favorite coffee. You are actively training your brain to enjoy the process, not just the outcome. Finally, we must talk about the internal monologue, the voice in your head. During a plateau, this voice can become your worst enemy. It is the voice of the inner critic, telling you that you are not good enough, that you are wasting your time. You must learn to manage this voice. The first step is to simply notice it. Recognize the negative self-talk for what it is, just a thought, not a fact. The second step is to reframe it. When the voice says, "I am terrible at this," you can consciously replace that thought with something more productive, like, "This part is challenging, which means I am in the stretch zone and my brain is growing." Or, "I have not figured this out yet, but I will if I keep practicing deliberately." This is not about lying to yourself. It is about adopting the language of a growth mindset. It is about practicing self-compassion. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend who was struggling. You would not tell your friend they were a talentless failure. You would offer them encouragement and support. You must learn to offer that same kindness to yourself. The journey of mastering a skill is not a straight line. It is a messy, winding path filled with exciting peaks, long, flat plateaus, and even some discouraging valleys. The people who make it to the end are not the ones who are the most talented. They are the ones who are the most resilient. They are the ones who understand that plateaus are part of the process. They have a toolkit of strategies to break through them. They have a deep, unshakable why that fuels them when the going gets tough. They have built robust systems that make their practice non-negotiable. And they have learned to be their own greatest cheerleader, not their own worst critic. This is the marathon mindset. It is the quiet understanding that success is not born from a single burst of inspiration, but from the humble, consistent, and courageous act of showing up day after day, especially on the days you do not feel like it. Embrace the plateau. It is not the end of your journey. It is where the real journey begins. Chapter 6. The Lifelong Learner, applying these principles to anything. We have reached the final and perhaps most important chapter of our journey together. Over the last 5 chapters, we have assembled an incredibly powerful toolkit. In Chapter 1, we learned the art of deconstruction, how to take a terrifying mountain of a skill and break it down into a series of small, climbable hills. We replaced overwhelm with a clear, actionable map. In Chapter 2, we built the engine for our climb, deliberate practice. We discarded the myth of mindless repetition and embraced a focused, strategic, and challenging approach that is the true driver of rapid improvement. In Chapter 3, we installed our guidance system, the feedback loop. We learned how to seek out, receive, and implement the information we need to correct our course and illuminate our blind spots, turning mistakes into our most valuable teachers. In Chapter 4, we took a look under the hood at the vehicle itself, our brain. We discovered how to hack its operating system with strategies like active recall, spaced repetition, and interleaving, and how to use the non-negotiable power of sleep to consolidate our learning and make it stick. And in Chapter 5, we developed the resilience for the long haul, learning how to understand, overcome, and even embrace the inevitable plateaus that mark the path to mastery, all while fueling our journey with a deep intrinsic motivation, our personal why. If you have absorbed the lessons from these chapters, You now possess a complete system for learning any single skill you desire, faster than you ever thought possible. You can take the skill you wrote down in the comments at the very beginning of this book and apply this framework to it, step by step, and you will achieve results that will astonish you. But the true purpose of this book, the secret mission behind all of these strategies, is not just to teach you how to learn one thing. It is to help you become a different kind of person. It is to help you transform yourself into a lifelong learner. The principles we have discussed are not just a set of isolated techniques to be used once and then put away. They are the foundational pillars of a new mindset, a new way of approaching your life, your career, and your personal growth. This final chapter is about zooming out from the specifics of a single skill and applying this entire system to the grandest skill of all, the skill of living a curious, adaptable, and endlessly interesting life. It is about moving from learning a skill to building an identity. The bedrock of this entire philosophy can be summed up in two words: growth mindset. This concept, pioneered by the brilliant Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck, is the master key that unlocks everything else. Dweck's decades of research have shown that people generally hold one of two core beliefs about their own intelligence and abilities. The first is the fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their qualities, like their intelligence, their artistic talent, or their athletic ability, are innate and unchangeable. You are either born smart or you are not. You are either a natural at sports or you are not. When you have a fixed mindset, every challenge becomes a test of your inherent abilities. If you succeed, it proves you are smart or talented. But if you fail, it is devastating. It feels like a final verdict, a judgment on your core identity. I failed the math test, which means I am bad at math. As a result, people in a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges, give up easily when they face obstacles, see effort as a sign of weakness. If you were really smart, you would not have to try so hard, and feel threatened by the success of others. They are playing defense with their ego, trying to protect their perceived status as a smart person or a talented person. The second belief system is the growth mindset. People with a growth mindset believe that their abilities can be developed through dedication, effort, and good strategies. They understand that the brain is like a muscle. It gets stronger with use. They do not see their intelligence or talent as a fixed entity, but as a starting point that can be cultivated and expanded. When you have a growth mindset, your entire relationship with challenges, effort, and failure is transformed. A challenge is no longer a scary test. It is an opportunity to learn and grow. An obstacle is not a sign to give up. It is a puzzle to be solved. Effort is not a sign of weakness. It is the very path that activates your potential and builds your abilities. Failure is not a final verdict. It is simply a piece of data, valuable feedback that tells you what to try differently next time. And the success of others is not a threat. It is a source of inspiration and a chance to learn. Everything we have discussed in this book is, in essence, a practical guide to living with a growth mindset. Deconstruction is the belief that a complex skill is not a monolithic talent, but a collection of learnable parts. Deliberate practice is the embodiment of the idea that focused effort is the key to building ability. The feedback loop is the process of actively seeking out information on your failures so you can grow from them. Hacking your brain is the understanding that you can actively improve your own learning processes. And overcoming plateaus is the ultimate test of a growth mindset, the belief that even when progress stalls, your abilities are not fixed and new strategies can unlock the next level. Adopting a growth mindset is the most important meta skill you can ever develop. It is the soil from which all other learning grows. So how do you cultivate it? It starts with your internal monologue, the voice in your head we discussed in the last chapter. You must become a detective of your own thoughts, constantly listening for the language of the fixed mindset and consciously replacing it with the language of the growth mindset. When you catch yourself thinking, "I can't do this," you add one powerful word: yet. I can't do this yet. This simple addition opens the door to possibility. It reframes the situation from a permanent state to a temporary one. When you face a setback and think, "I am a failure," you reframe it. "I failed at this task," which is an opportunity to learn what went wrong. You separate your identity from the outcome. When you feel jealous of someone else's success, you reframe it. That is amazing what they have accomplished. What can I learn from their approach? This is a conscious daily practice. It is the act of choosing to interpret your world through a lens of possibility and growth, rather than a lens of judgment and limitation. Once you begin to cultivate this mindset, the next step is to build a lifestyle around it. You need to transform learning from something you do for a specific project into something that is woven into the very fabric of your daily existence. The first thread in this fabric is curiosity. Children are the ultimate learning machines because they are endlessly curious. They ask why constantly. They poke things. They take things apart. They are not afraid to look foolish. As we get older, we often suppress this natural curiosity. We become more concerned with having the right answers than with asking good questions. The lifelong learner actively fights against this trend. They cultivate a state of intellectual humility, the understanding that there is always more to learn and that their current knowledge is incomplete. You can actively train your curiosity muscle. Start by asking more questions, both of others and of yourself. When you read an article, do not just passively consume it. Ask yourself, do I agree with this? What is the counter-argument? How does this connect to something else I know? Start a curiosity journal. Whenever a question pops into your head during the day, no matter how random, write it down. Why is the sky blue? How does a car engine actually work? What is the history of the chair I am sitting on? Then, once a week, pick one of those questions and spend an hour falling down the rabbit hole of the internet, just for the joy of learning something new. This practice reawakens your sense of wonder and makes the world a more interesting place. It transforms you from a passive observer of life into an active investigator. You start to see learning opportunities everywhere. The world is no longer just a place you live in, it is a curriculum you get to explore. The most effective way to structure this exploration is through project-based learning. As we discussed, a vague goal like "I want to learn photography" is hard to act upon. A project, on the other hand, is a specific, tangible outcome that provides a natural framework for learning. Instead of learning photography, your project could be, create a high-quality photo book of my family's summer vacation. This project immediately gives you a reason to learn. It naturally forces you to deconstruct the skill. You will realize you need to learn about composition to frame your shots, about lighting to take photos in different conditions, and about editing software to process your images. The project becomes the container for your deliberate practice. You are not just practicing abstract skills. You are applying them to a meaningful goal. It also provides a natural feedback loop. You can show your photos to others and get their input. The project transforms learning from a chore into a creative act. The lifelong learner always has a project on the go. It does not have to be a massive undertaking. It could be something small. Maybe this month's project is learn to cook the perfect omelette, or build a simple bookshelf for my living room, or write one blog post about a topic I am passionate about. These projects become your personal research and development department. They are your playground for acquiring new skills and knowledge. Think about something you are curious about right now. How could you turn that curiosity into a small, tangible project that you could start this weekend? Maybe you are curious about investing. Your project could be, open a practice stock trading account and try to grow a virtual $1,000 by 10% in 3 months. This is a safe, practical way to learn by doing. This project-based approach is the engine of a learning lifestyle. It ensures that you are always in the stretch zone, always building, always growing. As you begin to tackle more projects in different fields, you will start to develop the most important meta skill of all, learning how to learn. You will get better at the process itself. You will become an expert deconstructor. When you approach a brand new field, you will have a system. You will know how to quickly identify the core components. You will know how to find the best resources, whether they are books, online courses, or communities of experts. You will know how to filter the good information from the bad. You will become a master at creating your own curriculum, tailored to your specific goals. This skill is the ultimate force multiplier. Once you know how to learn, no field is truly closed off to you. You have the confidence to step into any area, from artificial intelligence to ancient history, and know that you have a process for making sense of it and acquiring competence. A key part of this meta skill is understanding the power of skill transfer. The brain does not store skills in isolated silos. The things you learn in one domain can have surprising benefits in others. When you learn to play a musical instrument, you are not just learning music. You are training your discipline, your fine motor skills, your ability to hear subtle differences in sound, and your capacity to delay gratification. These underlying abilities are highly transferable. The discipline you build practicing scales can be applied to sticking with a difficult workout routine. The problem-solving skills you develop while debugging a piece of code can be transferred to untangling a complex business problem. The communication and empathy you learn in a public speaking club can make you a better partner and parent. The lifelong learner is always looking for these connections. They see their collection of skills not as a series of separate items, but as an interconnected web. As you learn more things, you are not just adding tools to your toolkit, you are upgrading the entire toolbox. You are making your brain a more powerful and flexible machine. Neuroscience backs this up. Learning new things, especially complex skills, promotes neuroplasticity. It encourages the growth of new neural connections and can even lead to the creation of new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. You are literally, physically, changing your brain for the better, making it more resilient and adaptable. This journey of lifelong learning should not and cannot be a solitary one. We are social creatures, and we learn best when we learn together. In Chapter 3, we talked about peer feedback groups for a specific skill. The lifelong learner takes this concept and applies it to their whole life. They consciously build a rich and diverse learning community around themselves. This could be a mastermind group, a concept popularized by Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich. This is a small group of people who meet regularly to support each other in their personal and professional growth. Each member brings their unique skills and perspectives to the table, creating a powerful collective intelligence. Being part of a group like this provides accountability, encouragement, and a constant source of new ideas. You can also accelerate your learning dramatically by embracing the role of the teacher. There is a psychological phenomenon known as the protégé effect, which shows that one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to someone else. When you know you have to explain a concept to another person, it forces you to organize your thoughts, to identify the core principles and to simplify complex ideas. It is the Feynman technique in action. You can do this in many ways. Start a blog or a YouTube channel about your learning journey. Volunteer to give a presentation at work on a new technology you have been exploring, or simply explain what you are learning to your friends and family. The act of teaching will expose the gaps in your own knowledge like nothing else, providing you with a powerful feedback loop, while also helping to solidify the information in your own mind. It creates a win-win situation where you learn more deeply by helping others learn. Finally, at the heart of the lifelong learning mindset is a radical redefinition of failure. Our society is generally terrified of failure. From a young age, we are taught that getting an F is the worst possible outcome. We are conditioned to avoid mistakes at all costs. This is the fixed mindset in its most toxic form, and it is the single greatest barrier to learning and innovation. The lifelong learner understands that failure is not the opposite of success. It is a fundamental part of the path to success. They see failure not as a verdict on their ability, but as an essential data point. When an experiment in a science lab fails, the scientist does not throw up their hands and quit. They are excited. The failure has given them a valuable piece of new information. It has told them one way that does not work, which brings them one step closer to finding the way that does. You must learn to adopt this mindset of the scientist in your own life. Every project you undertake, every new skill you try to learn is an experiment. Some will succeed and some will fail. If they fail, you do not attach your ego to the outcome. You simply analyze the data. What went wrong? What was my hypothesis? What did I learn from this outcome? How can I use this data to design a better experiment next time? This is the mindset that allows innovators and entrepreneurs to persist through countless setbacks. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work on his path to inventing the light bulb. J.K. Rowling's first Harry Potter book was rejected by 12 different publishers before one finally took a chance on it. These are not stories of superhuman talent. They are stories of superhuman resilience, fueled by a growth mindset and the ability to treat failure as feedback. You must give yourself permission to fail. You must create a safe space in your life for experimentation, where the goal is not always to succeed but simply to learn. The person who is willing to try more things and therefore fail more often will ultimately learn more and achieve more than the person who plays it safe, forever stuck in their comfort zone. You now have the complete blueprint. You have the specific tactics for learning a single skill, and you have the overarching mindset for building a life of continuous growth. This is not about becoming a genius or a polymath who is an expert in 20 different fields. It is about something much more profound. It is about staying engaged with the world. It is about keeping your mind active, flexible, and young. It is about having the confidence to reinvent yourself when your career demands it, and the curiosity to explore new passions just for the joy of it. It is about building a richer, more textured, and more interesting life. The tools are now in your hands. The question is, what will you build? What mountain will you choose to climb first? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and your journey as a lifelong learner begins with the conscious decision to embrace growth, to seek out challenges, and to see every day as a new opportunity to learn something new. The power to learn anything is not a gift you are born with. It is a choice you make every single day. A final word. We have traveled a long way together in this book. We began with a simple but powerful question. How can we learn new skills faster? We started our journey by staring up at a giant, intimidating mountain, a metaphor for any complex skill we have ever dreamed of mastering. We felt the overwhelm, the doubt, and the belief that such heights were reserved for the naturally talented. Now, as we stand here at the end of our journey, the mountain has not shrunk, but our perspective has been fundamentally transformed. We no longer see an insurmountable obstacle. We see a series of manageable steps. We see a path. We have learned that the foundation of this path is deconstruction, the art of breaking down complexity into simplicity. We learned to build our engine with deliberate practice, understanding that it is the quality and focus of our effort, not the sheer quantity of hours, that forges expertise. We equipped ourselves with the GPS of the feedback loop, learning to hunt for our own mistakes and treat them as our most valuable guides. We dove deep into the machinery of our own brains, discovering how to work with them, not against them, using scientifically backed strategies for memory and retention to make our learning last. We learned to anticipate and conquer the inevitable plateaus, developing the marathon mindset needed to persist when our initial motivation fades. And finally, we have tied it all together, elevating these techniques from a simple toolkit into a coherent philosophy for life, the philosophy of the lifelong learner. The central message of this book is a deeply optimistic one. It is a declaration of independence from the tyranny of talent. The ability to learn quickly and effectively is not a genetic gift bestowed upon a lucky few. It is a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. You now have the instruction manual. You possess the method. The gap between you and the people you admire, the people who have mastered the skills you desire, is not a gap of talent. It is a gap of strategy, and you now have the strategy. The power has always been within you, you just needed the right framework to unlock it. But knowledge, as we have learned, is not enough. Reading this book and understanding the concepts is like reading a map. It is a crucial first step, but no map has ever transported anyone to their destination. The transformation happens not in the reading, but in the doing. The true value of these pages will be determined by the actions you take after you put this book down. Remember the skill you thought of at the very beginning, the one you may have shared in the comments? I want you to bring it to mind right now. Look at it not with the old eyes of doubt, but with the new eyes of a strategic learner. Ask yourself, what is the smallest, most laughably simple component of that skill that I could practice for just 15 minutes today? Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Maybe it is just watching one video on how to hold a guitar pick. Maybe it is learning to say hello and thank you in a new language. Maybe it is just opening a blank document and writing a single sentence of that book you have always wanted to write. Take that first step. Feel the small victory, and then use that momentum to take the next step tomorrow. This is how the journey begins. This book is a starting point, a foundation. The conversation about learning, growing, and pushing our potential continues. It is a vast and endlessly fascinating subject, and new insights and strategies are being discovered all the time. If you are passionate about exploring the frontiers of personal development and want to join a community of fellow learners who are committed to building their best lives, you can find more discussions, strategies, and inspiration on my channel, Audio Waves. We are all on this journey together, and the path is always more rewarding when it is shared. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me. The future belongs to the learners. It belongs to those who can adapt, grow, and reinvent themselves in a world that is constantly changing. You now have the tools to be one of those people. The mountain is waiting. Take the first step.